Hello everyone. So in this video, I'm going to be looking at the difference between the spiritual INFJs and the spiritualized INFJ, in the sense that this particular distinction is not necessarily very obvious to you guys yet. The spiritual INFJs is a subtype of INFJ, a fourth subtype of INFJ that I introduced recently in a video. It's not a subtype that has yet appeared in my writings. It's newer than that. But I thought that given the evidence that was accumulating in front of my eyes, it had to be added. And I jokingly called it in the video that I dedicated to that subtype, the good enough INFJ, in the sense that we might consider that this is an INFJ that has had good enough parenting, to paraphrase a concept by Donald Winnicott, the psychoanalyst and pediatrician, Donald Winnicott. Now, what distinguishes the spiritual INFJ from the spiritualized INFJ? The main difference, is that the spiritual INFJ does not go through the stages of adaptive submission and solipsism, whereas the spiritualized INFJ does. At the very least, the spiritualized INFJ goes through one of those stages. Most commonly, I would say both of those stages. One reason also being that the solipsistic stage and the adaptive submissive stage we sort of categorize them separately for topographical reasons, for reasons of understanding and clarity of exposition, but often people have traits of both, somewhat parallel to many other aspects that you encounter, for example, in psychoanalysis, where psychoanalysis, particularly of a Freudian origin, would refer to people who are more oral, people who are more anal, people who are more phallic, but often people are mixes of these things. But there's a dominant trait. So an adaptive INFJ tends to be dominantly adaptive, might occasionally have solipsistic defenses. A solipsistic INFJ would be primarily in the way they organize their life, solipsistic, withdrawn, and so on. They might still have some adaptive defenses. So I think that's relatively straightforward to understand, which is why spiritualized refers to an achievement at some level, is something that you were not in the first instance. Whereas a spiritual INFJ is something that you are in the first instance. You are the product of your parenting and your early childhood development. In some sense, if you're a spiritual INFJ, you are someone who has healthy self-esteem from the get-go and who's confident about their ability to cope with the world and to adapt to reality with alienation from the get-go. I talk as well about a non-severed kind of alienation, to emphasize that for the spiritual INFJ, the question of severance does not arise, because they experience, and this is linked to their position of feeling psychological safety in the environment, including the social environment. They do not experience a massive, troublesome, and characteristic disjunction between the inner world, which is really a world, and the external world. They do sense, of course, they can see that those two worlds are not the same, but the bridging for them is something that just arises out of the way they were brought up. And so as they transition to adolescence and adulthood, they add up more and more steps toward completing that bridging. And so therefore for them, prescience is vocation, the idea of the calling, the idea of translating the insights of your inner worldview, the architecture of your inner world into an actual externalized life project, something that happens more gradually, more naturally, I would say more linearly than it does for a spiritualized INFJ, whose path to spirit understood as meaningfulness, as the attunement with the meaningfulness of the world, is more dialectical. Okay, I used the word Hegelian, I think, in a previous video, which is even more jargon. We don't need to refer to Hegel here, we can just say dialectical, going through stages that are kind of oppositions to each other, like thesis, adaptive submission, antithesis, solipsism, synthesis, spiritualization. Notice the big difference here between spiritual and spiritualized. Because the spiritualized stage is a dialectical result in ideal circumstances of the opposition between adaptation and solipsism, it also, in its being a resolution of these stages that the individual has been through, it is also something that, so it goes beyond those stages, but it contains their essential kernel within itself. And I think that makes sense. Spiritualized INFJ doesn't thereby forget their adaptive period or their solipsistic period. It's just that these are transcended, but the best aspects of these stages, the most informative aspects of these stages, are preserved. It doesn't happen in the case of the spiritual INFJ simply because the spiritual INFJ, with a good enough chilling INFJ, in the words of a viewer, and I thought they were quite revealing words, the chilling INFJ who's comfortable being in the world in the first instance, does not have to go through those stages. Now, in terms of concrete life experience and the way that these INFJs are going to conduct their lives, especially, into adulthood and later stages of adulthood, this difference that you will almost certainly notice is that those INFJs that are change makers, these INFJs that are revolutionaries, that are radicals, that really try to bring change in the world for other INFJs or for other people at large, are much more likely to be spiritualized. That's because these INFJs have been through the other stages. They know what it's like, and they have an acute awareness of the fact that the world as it is, technologically speaking, in terms of its obsession with cause and effect, in terms of its obsession with the present moment, is not hospitable to a great deal of INFJ experience. The spiritual INFJ will have a notion of this too, but that sensibility will be somewhat muted by the inherent comfort they find having had good enough parenting, that they won't feel, they will be able to carve out a niche for themselves and islands of spirit much more naturally and inertially, I would say, and won't feel like the acute pain that the other type has been through, the other subtype has been through. It's a little bit like, when you read self-help books, or when you read like books of philosophy like Marcus Aurelius's, Stoic masterpiece, the Meditations. The people who write these books are people who have done a lot of self-work due to, a lot of the time, mental pain. It's not obvious for Marcus Aurelius that he can achieve the ideal Stoic stage. It's not ideal for like the best self-help writers that, they have gotten to the stage where they wanted to get. It's not ideal for those who actively promote meditation. It's often those who have struggled more that want to share more because they empathize, I think, with people who might be in their situation, or rather their prior situation. It's not that the spiritual INFJ lacks empathy, of course. They have a lot of empathy in the INFJ manner, and they'll be able to manifest it more consistently from early on. However, they just won't feel that much urgency or pressure because their life trajectory has been different. Okay, so that's one way you tell them apart. So if you enjoyed this video, please give me a like, especially as you can see that my thumb is sunny. Don't forget, I've written 2 books on the INFJ. The Infinite Soul is my latest one. The sun is telling you to get this book, INFJ Life in Modern World. The world is often seen as hostile to INFJs, but this book explores how INFJs can find happiness, purpose, and value in the world, all while maintaining their authentic nature as INFJs. So get the book if you're interested. The link is right below, and please drop reviews if you can. That helps with the referencing of the book. Okay, guys? The prequel is The Ecstatic Soul, a new look at the INFJ personality that looks more at the inside of the INFJ mind, INFJ consciousness, its existential manifestations. It's the most in-depth investigation of the INFJ mind you'll find. So the link is below, it's the prequel. And as usual, Patreon is the lifeblood of my channel, guys. I rely on your donations, your very kind donations. There's a Patreon link down below where you can basically subscribe for $3.50 a month or more if you want to. You get access to bonus content, bonus videos. You get access to me. You can ask me questions, suggest new content as well. Consider it, and I'll talk to you next time, guys. Bye-bye.